Hello and welcome to Rush Roundtable episode number 156, Prime Mover. On the panel today, we have Kira McManus, Ryan Murphy, uh, Ryder Heidick, Alex Kelly, and Ralph Huffnagel. I forgot to say me. I'm here too. And
and the very new guest. Don't forget to mention the new guest.
oh yeah, Ryan's saying that my beard is the new guest.
There you go. Your mustache.
What's that on your face?
That's my mustache.
All other dudes can just grow beards, but apparently when I grow one, it's news.
I've beat that joke to death, so now we're done with that. So there you go.
No, it's amusing. So Prime Mover is the fifth song on Hold Your Fire. Last song on side one, if you prefer to think of albums in that way, which I do. So Prime Mover, the philosopher Aristotle believed that the universe must have a prime mover, a force of being that is responsible for everything that happens. Some people believe that the prime mover is God or some other deity. Perhaps this song suggests that we can or should be our own prime mover. A god or maybe a watchmaker, perhaps, sets the wheels in motion. But alternating currents and rational responses to those currents can force a change of plans. So I wonder if maybe the song is telling us that we should go about our journey and enjoy it as we go through it and know that anything can happen. So the song kind of starts out with a pretty epic intro. It's not very long, but within it, there is some really epic sounding synths, and there's a bass solo, and it's not the only bass solo in the song. But going into the verses, so we start out with basic elemental instinct to survive, stirs the higher passions, thrill to be alive. Alternating currents in a tidewater surge, rational resistance to an unwise urge, anything can happen. That sort of suggests that we start out our lives as we're developing, kind of reacting to the things that happen to us and trying to stay out of trouble and trying to just make rational responses to things. Ryder, the next section, if you want to talk about it, goes from the point of conception to the moment of truth, at the point of surrender to the burden of proof, from the point of ignition to the final drive. The point of the journey is not to arrive. Anything can happen.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing on the first section? The third word in the whole song is instinct, and that goes right back to the theme of this entire album. Mm-hmm. So I love that they mentioned that so quick, and I love the guitar part underneath this. Yes. Yeah, right. So yeah, full disclosure, I am not prepared for this episode at all because I was last minute addition. So there's my contribution to that. So sorry, Ryder, go ahead.
Oh, you're all good. But yeah, I mean, coming in off of that first verse, very about instinct and about human nature, and going into this first chorus right here. As Todd said in the intro, the prime mover is something that a lot of people really concern a lot of their life, thinking about. People try and find that through religion, science, whatever. But I feel like this chorus is kind of talking about breaking that a little bit. It's talking about how from the second you're there, it doesn't really matter how you got there. It's about what you're doing while you're here. And a lot of people believe, we only get one shot at life. And this chorus, at least to me, shows that it's important to have the optimism that you can, anything can happen. Things might seem kind of bad at one point, or things seem very uncertain, but there's a lot of things that can go on. Me, myself, I'm in college right now. I have no idea what's going to happen after this, but, anything can happen. And it's a really cool message in the song, especially touching back to some of the themes from albums like 2112, where it's all about individuality and self-expression. I feel a lot of that in here. And then the chorus ends with a super sweet bass solo. It's so good. Once again, highlighting, Getty's wall and all the little triplets and whatever he does in it. It's great. It's really great.
The point of a journey is not to arrive is my favorite Neil quote or Neil line. Rush lyric.
Right up there with me too.
Officially.
Yeah.
This is like my favorite. And I have used it to get through some hard times for sure. Like right now, because sometimes when you go through life and you have a goal, like for me, I was in graduate school. Sometimes you're not meant to meet that goal or finish. You're meant to do something else. And that can be very difficult. So it's a very inspiring line. It's like arguably one of the best Rush lyrics ever.
Sure. There's a lot of really great lyrics in this song.
And as somebody who also did not finish graduate school, I totally feel that. But I'm so glad that I have no regrets for anything that I did in my formative years. So it moves on to the second verse, which is basic temperamental filters on our eyes, alter our perceptions, lenses polarize. Alternating currents force a show of hands, rational responses force a change of plans. Anything can happen. And that's interesting because in the first verse, he said rational resistance to an unwise urge. And this time it's rational responses force a change of plans, which kind of suggests that as you develop as a person, you find that you can react to the things that happen to you and go with them and respond to your passions, still rationally, apparently, according to these lyrics, but you can follow where your heart takes you instead of just trying to stay alive.
For sure. Yeah.
This would be where they pulled the live album from too. The name of it rather. Yeah.
Absolutely. Force a show of hands.
Yep. Also, one thing to think of is that with Neil using the phrase rational resistance and then rational responses, that goes back to Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand was looking at her protagonists in The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged as prime movers. And in that respect, she was also all about the rational. And needless to say, I mean, Neil's all about connecting those dots. So he is doing that, still throwing those nods in here with these verses.
Yeah, and I read some in my prep. I read some discussion about the Ayn Rand angle, and apparently, in her writing, she capitalizes prime mover. I don't know that for sure, but I because I'm not very familiar with her work, but I thought that was kind of interesting. And,
well, I mean, that speaks back to Aristotle and with the idea of a prime mover being a proper noun, basically. I mean, Aristotle was Hellenistic Greece, so it was, polytheist. But so at that point, we're looking at, it's not Zeus. Zeus had parents. There's a different prime mover that is there, and that speaks to the spark of electricity in the human body, which he also was putting with alternating currents and resistance, rational resistance too, more writers' puns as far as the electricity that is in the body and drives us, sparks us to life. Now we're talking about Frankenstein, and then moves us forward in life.
There's a whole bunch of great stuff in that little section right there. We move on to from a point on the compass to magnetic north, the point of the needle moving back and forth. From the point of entry until the candle is burned, the point of departure is not to return. Anything can happen. Fabulous. I absolutely love that part. Kira, did you want to add anything?
I mean, sure. I have to say, a prime mover, also according to the Song by Song book, and I did look this up, is also a term in physics for converting energy into movement. Anyone knows I have a science degree, so I'm a bit of a science nerd. I have to say, Neil ingeniously blends these lyrics: psychology, philosophy, science, physics, and it's just absolutely ingenious and really, really interesting how he weaves all these different sort of aspects together. I also find it interesting that our perspectives are all different depending on our backgrounds, our life experiences, whatnot. But this part of the song has another really great line that I enjoy. The point of departure is not to return. kind of mysterious. Not really exactly sure what it's supposed to mean, but I kind of like in this verse and throughout the song that we have this references to scientific principles. I just find it so like interesting, the analogy of science and machines and technology to human beings. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is it just me, or is it kind of ironic that we have this continuous theme talking about the relationship between technology, human science, and yet this is during the time period where Rush used a lot of technology over Alex's guitar? I don't know.
They listed all the tech they used on the album notes, and it was just like at some, it was just crazy the amount of technology that they used. Yeah, absolutely. That's cool.
Yeah. One thing I really like is the like analogies and comparisons to, the compass, and like from the point on a compass to magnetic north, magnetic north is like, a lot of, it's where it's definite, but at any point on the compass, there's anything that could happen from there. And once again, the point of a needle to move back and forth, I think that's pretty interesting too, thinking about how, we're so focused on like the action and the destination of where that needle goes. You think of things like a thermostat or like a guitar tuner, but you don't think about the fact that it's, the whole point of it is to measure, what's going on in like a situation. I think that's another cool, like, thing into how, once again, people are so focused on like the destination and like having a finality to everything. They're not even concerned about what's happening along the way.
Right, we don't really stop and smell the roses enough. We're just like focused on getting through each day and getting through the bits of our lives, right?
I mean, that kind of speaks to Time Stands Still again, as far as from the point of entry into the world to the candles burned, metaphor for the end of our lives. And as far as the point of departure, not to return, I mean, in Time Stands Still, he was talking about acknowledging the event, acknowledging maybe what has happened, but still moving forward and not looking back or not trying to revisit, but just we're going forward. But yes.
All right. Well, speaking of, I note the like cyclic kind of looping of themes we got going on here of instinct, human evolution, the human experience, fate, and destiny. It's perfect that we keep seeing these themes pop up over and over again. It's just that they're written at different angles. That's something that I really like about this song and just this album in general. It's just like constantly popping up. I mean, instinct, this is what, the third or fourth time it's been mentioned in the album. I mean, it was a big focus of Open Secrets, and it just keeps going.
And especially going into songs like, Lock and Key, and it's interesting all the different perspectives you think about with instinct, like not to backtrack into the song a little bit, but thinking of going between rational resistance into rational responses. That's, think acting on instinct. I think of that, somebody walks up to you with a crack pipe or whatever, and if you have a little bit of sense to you, you're going to say no to that. That's a rational resistance to that. But sometimes you'll learn about some stuff, and then not using the crack pipe anymore, but people pose stuff to you, and instead of being immediately resistant to it, you're going to be willing to have a conversation about it too. Your instincts, instinct is still a very important part of human life throughout our entire lives. We're still animals, but it's very interesting to think about how that evolves throughout. Maybe a crack pipe wasn't the best analogy, but I don't know. I'm just shoot or shoot.
I know exactly what you're saying. When I look at the line,
Todd knows all about that crap.
No, not about. I was thinking of different kinds of temptations, of which I know about. But whenever I see the line or hear the line, the point of departure is not to return, I think about how I should have taken that advice, because I have moved so many times, and I've gone from state to state and to city, and there are a lot, and I'm very indecisive, and there are a lot of times or a couple of times where I've actually moved back to a place where I've lived before, because I thought, oh, well, you know what, I think that's my favorite place, and that was always a mistake. And so I think about that, the point of the point of departure is not to return. If you experience something and you move on from it, maybe it's best not to go back to it. Maybe you'll learn and grow more if you don't do that. So that always hits me when I hear that. So moving on to a kind of another really important section, I set the wheels in motion, turn up all the machines, activate the programs, and run behind the scene. I set the clouds in motion, turn up light and sound, activate the window, and watch the world go round. So that suggests that, there maybe is a prime mover that's actually sets this up, but doesn't necessarily determine what your destiny is and what you make of it. What do you think, Ralph?
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because I think the song, and especially this bridge, I think it is, was inspired partly by the Power Windows album. Neil was taken with the guy looking out the window with the remote control, as if he could control it. And it was also partly inspired by a weatherman in Quebec at the time, who would sit when it would start his simulated map for the weather. He would say, "And now I set the clouds in motion." So I thought that was interesting. And with this verse, to me, like the whole song, like we've been mentioning, is like you start out with your basic instinct just to survive. Then we're moving on to our temperament, our emotions, and how they control us. And this bridge, I think, feels like it's him taking control. Whoever, I'm trying to do more to take control of my life. Can't control everything that happens. Anything can happen, but he's more in control of it and trying to direct it how he wants.
Yeah. I actually, it was so great to hear that story about the weatherman, because I think that is a totally cool way to I would like that weatherman, because I think that's a really great way to describe what happens when that satellite image comes in and the clouds move. That's just great. I can see why he was inspired to use that more than once.
Now, every time you look at the Power Windows cover, you're going to think of prime mover.
I think one interesting thing about, at least to me is an alternate kind of interpretation of the last lyric. This whole bridge section is so focused on construction and building things up. I set the wheels in motions, I activate the programs, set the clouds in motions, turn up light and sound. And then the last two, activate the window and watch the world go round. I think, if we're thinking about a prime mover in the sense of religion, let's think about, not to get crazy into this, but let's think about God. A lot of religions center their focus on, God created everything and God has a plan for everything, right? But I think this kind of has a little different of an interpretation. If this song is, if it's about God, or just the nature of being somebody that sets something in motion, I think this last line, and specifically watch the world go round, is, I've made this space for you. Let's just see what happens. Maybe not intently as a big divine plan, everything has to happen a certain way. Anything can happen, That's at least how I see this last thing, is I've set everything in motion. Let's just see how it goes.
And at the risk of saying something controversial, a lot of people really lean on that when they think about, oh, God has a plan, and that you don't have to, you just sit back and let him do it. It's kind of, I think Neil's telling us that that's not really how it works. Or maybe that's not the best way to go.
And there's no issue with believing in that. It's just it's a very interesting counterpoint to a way a lot of people think about, it's just a different way of seeing things. It's not bad if you see things one way. It's just another interesting perspective you can have, and it lets you lead your life in a little bit of a different way.
We all have different perspectives. And your life experiences set your perspectives, but the ending message to me, and I'm pulling from the song by song book a little bit, but I agree, is that destiny is not predetermined. We can't really control everything that happens in life. A lot of things that happen in life are out of our control, but it's the way that we respond to it that we can control. And again, this brings up the theme of humans conquering adversity and human evolution, and that's how we adapt. We have to learn to adapt to not just our life, but the whole entire world, the way it's changing around us. But I've got one more thing to say, then I'll stop babbling. Sorry. But I find it interesting that I think it's interesting that Neil has all these references to like science and machines, because you can control a machine. Also, I mean, there's different areas of science. My graduate degree covered epidemiology, but I also studied physics. Physics has a finite set of laws. Like the first law of thermodynamics, where you cannot create energy or destroy it, you can only convert it, which is funny because a prime mover is in physics is something that converts energy, but you can't control life. So it's almost like they're really like antagonistic relationship, but he's also describing it as a synergistic relationship. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that. I just think it's really unique, really mysterious that he's using science, which has a finite set of rules and laws, but life is the complete opposite of that. Just a really interesting juxtaposition that I noticed. I'm done now.
No, that is great, and that makes me see it just on. I mean, I was already impressed with these lyrics, but that just makes me see it on a whole other level. The final chorus is the same as the first time around, but I'm going to read it again because I love it so much. From the point of conception to the moment of truth, at the point of surrender to the burden of proof, from the point of ignition to the final drive, the point of the journey is not to arrive. Anything can happen. So I wanted to say something about the instrumental sections in this song. Instrumentally, Alice and Geddy are not providing just the primary melody, but also multiple counter melodies that all fit together. And in fact, during the choruses, the bottom end actually comes from the bass pedals, but Geddy's playing the electric bass, and it's a counter melody that he's playing that fits with the main melody. Alex uses several different guitar effects to introduce even more counter melodies. The synths add even more. And it's funny how people tend to look at Hold Your Fire specifically as an album where perhaps Alex doesn't have a lot to do, or isn't, you can't hear him. I hear that all the time. But when you listen to this song, when Alex comes in, he's plenty loud and right up front in the mix. And
he's
so
also
I
the
always
first
use
thing
this
you
song
hear.
as an example. If anybody ever says that, oh, poor Alex, you couldn't hear him on Hold Your Fire. I'm like, oh yeah, you can. I can hear him. What do you guys think of that?
Well, the intro, I mean, it's basically a D power chord for the first four measures, with Geddy bringing in the kind of the major, he's hitting the D to the F sharp. So Geddy makes it major, and then Lifeson brings in the big D chords that he's dropping. The thing I think is interesting is the intro it almost feels short to me. Not too short, but not drawn out. We're not talking Metallica circa anything in the 80s, but it's the sort of thing where when the verse first comes in, Neil drops out. And when I was listening to this within the last week, I thought, how many other songs where Neil just drops out? It's like, it's Neil. The drums, because he lands on in the first measure of the first, the absolute first measure of the verse. Then he's got 6 measures of tacit, and then at the end of the 7th or 8th measure, he's back in, and they're all in. And then later in the song, it flips it around, where guitar, of course, drops out. Neil's got a different rhythm he's playing later in the interlude with some keys. So I just thought those are nice little subtleties that it could be easy to miss.
Yeah. I think one really great bit of instrumentation is just like, well, not bit of instrumentation. I guess the whole section is, the bridge going into the outro. It opens up, very sparse with, it's just Neil and the little synth arpeggio, which I've already talked about how much I love the synth arpeggios on the episode for Open Secrets. Go check that out if you haven't already. It's just a but what's really cool is how Neil bounces off of it. His drum pattern is it's really off kilter if you listen to it on its own. Boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, ba, ba. But it links up perfectly and fills in a lot of the spaces with that arpeggio, so that as more stuff begins to get introduced throughout that little section, Geddy starts playing just a couple little lines on the bass, and Alex starts showing up, and then eventually ba, 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 bam, and it just goes right into the outro section, which I really have to, give some applause to the live version of this on Show of Hands. It's not on the release that's on CD, vinyl, and streaming. Right. But if you watch the DVD, if you can find it on YouTube, this outro section, it just gets so much beefier. But even on the recording, it's still a really great, upbeat. The arpeggio's still in there, giving a lot of movement. And as we've said countless times before, all the different counter melodies that are going on. It's a very dense piece of music that there's just so much going on. But it's a really great, uplifting way to end the track.
A lot of times when there's discussion of synth in some of these songs, I think sometimes it doesn't get noticed that sometimes the synth melody or sequencing kind of sets something up that one of the other members will play upon, and if it wasn't there, it wouldn't be as interesting, because it kind of provides the base for everything that happens on top of it. I wanted to talk about something that, if I can get on my soapbox for a minute, you hear a lot of criticism about fade outs. And how fade outs are a cop out, and fade outs are something that you shouldn't do. That's what people do when they can't think of an ending and all that stuff. But this song is a perfect example of a fade out being absolutely the right thing to do. And one of my favorite things about the whole song is that Geddy's sustained vocal, when he says on can, when he says anything can, and he holds can for a really long time, that happens after the song starts fading out. And I think it's so effective, and so it's the first thing that I've got many favorite parts of this song, but that was my first favorite part when I heard this back when I was in college, was that part. And it leaves you thinking, no, it's just now it's really getting good, and now it's going away. I think that's very effective, and in this case, I think brilliant.
I was exactly going to say that thing too. I was thinking that like an hour and a half ago, that so many people want to believe that fade outs are a bad thing. The song ends the way it's supposed to end. If it clamps down on a perfect cadence, phenomenal. If it fades out for 25 seconds, awesome. It's basically like a fade out keeps the song in your head. So, I mean, you could have that da-da-da-da-da, and you're remembering it, but now you're into the next song. But in this case, when they do a fade out, they're keeping it there. And they did that on Grace Under Pressure. The Enemy Within faded out. You flip the record over, or flip the tape, quickly fast forward, get to the end of the tape, flip the tape, and then you're ready to come in again. So they set it up so that way you go to side two with that song in your head. It's not just some break like, okay, oh, now I'm ready to play. Right. It's intentional, and it's a good thing.
You know what else is intentional on this song is, we talk about this all the time, the repetition of the phrase anything can happen. It's repeated so much because that's really what Neil felt, and quite frankly lived, especially later in later years. But yeah, the only thing I want to say is, I know this was the only track, or rather the only time this track was played live was on the subsequent tour for this album. But this version of Prime Mover live on a Show of Hands, especially the ending where Alex comes out to center stage and he's just rocking out, and Geddy's, belting out anything can happen over and over and over again. If you think Hold Your Fire sucks, or you don't like Hold Your Fire, go watch a Show of Hands and go watch the the Hold Your Fire songs on a show of hands, and specifically Prime Mover, because I think it will change your mind.
That maybe can be something that we can wish for as far as a release from the Rush camp, is maybe a longer version of Show of Hands that has everything on it.
Yep.
Listening to a show of hands definitely puts all these songs in a different light. It's glorious.
It does. Not to go on too much of a tangent, but a couple of years ago, I decided to have kind of a little shootout about, I played all of the Rush live albums in a row to try to determine which one I thought was the best. And I didn't expect a Show of Hands to win. And so, yeah, it's my favorite live album. And I think it sounds the best. And I think the arrangements are brilliant. But does anybody else have anything to add? I really like what Ryan said about, if you don't take anything away from this song, but one thing, and that one thing should be anything can happen. And I think that I have always thought that was very inspiring. But thanks very much to the panel. I believe is our next Rush Roundtable going to be Lock and Key, or is something else coming for it?
Yep, we're gonna go Lock and Key, and then we're gonna go something else, and then we'll get back into Hold Your Fire. So take a little break after Lock and Key. But yep, Lock and Key's next. So flip the record over and see us next time.
Great, yeah. Thanks to the panel, and thanks everyone for joining us. This has been Rush Roundtable. Thanks everyone.